Cool. Okay. Right. For the sake of the listeners, I'd like to introduce Mollie Ball from HubSpot and Stuart Balcombe from Arrows.to, and I'm going to let these guys introduce themselves formally. Today's HUG is about customer success, in particularly onboarding, and how you can now learn to do that with HubSpot Service Hub and Arrows.to. That's the frame. Let's jump into it. Guys, do you want to take it from the top? Let's start with Mollie and then Stuart follow up.
Amazing. So thank you so much. I'm Mollie Ball. I am the sales specialist for Service Hub in HubSpot. So what I do is I assist the sales reps in hopefully closing deals, primarily for Service Hub. So I live, eat, and breathe Service Hub day in, day out. That's where I spend all my time. And I get to talk to all different kinds of customers because I'm not linked to a segment or a region. So sorry, I'm linked with EMEA, but I'm not linked to small biz, mid-market, corp. I do it all. So they give me their use cases, I build out a demo, and then we sign the dotted line.
And Stuart?
Yeah, so I lead growth at Arrows. We're a relatively early stage company that just got investment from HubSpot Ventures and have been pretty deep in the HubSpot ecosystem for a year now. We build a tool for customer onboarding that gives customers and onboarding teams sort of a collaborative plan where everybody can go figure out what's next, always have transparency on what everybody needs to do, and deeply integrate, sort of feel native inside of HubSpot, whether you're using Sales Hub or Service Hub, which we're going to get into today, but Arrow's collaborative plans attached to deals or tickets. So,
perfect. And I'm Paul Sullivan, and I'm the founder of BIAS, and I bring you this weekly HUG on a Tuesday evening. Now, Stuart, if you see me looking to the right, I'm just looking at my questions because I'm on like two separate computers, not even two screens. Right? But just to get us going, let's talk about success on HubSpot, and let's just a little about where Arrows comes from and get into that journey, just to give people an in-depth background.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a pretty interesting journey for the 2-3 years that the Arrows has been around now. But the first sort of 18 months of that until April last year, it's funny. I'm joining today from a company offsite in Palm Springs, where a year ago we made the decision to go all in on HubSpot as a platform. Previously, Arrows was a standalone tool. We had an integration with HubSpot, had an integration with other CRMs, but it was sort of very much your standard, we can push some data over here, we can take some data in. You had to go to Arrows to do everything. And the reason that we made the decision to go all in on HubSpot and help enable success teams to run more of that process in HubSpot, it was because we kept hearing sort of two things over and over from teams. One, I don't want another inbox that I have to go manage. I don't want another tool where I have to go enter more data in as well as entering it in my CRM. My enablement team is bugging me, or my ops team is bugging me about making sure the CRM record is up to date, making sure that they will have data. I don't want two places to go and do that. And at the same time, the importance, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit more, but especially modern go-to-market, modern customer success relies on you having a complete picture of the customer journey, and being able to pull all of your customer data together in one place is incredibly high leverage for everybody, every team that is interacting with customers. So we sort of made that decision to really become a native extension of HubSpot and sort of help teams keep everything together, keep everybody focused on what needs to happen to make customers successful, which at the end of the day is what everybody is here to do, right?
Yeah. And speaking about HubSpot, coming back to Mollie, how do you see the value of Arrows? Because I know that we've had conversations and you're quite positive about it.
Yeah. So what I love about Service Hub in terms of the HubSpot kind of ecosystem is that you can do anything with Service Hub in that you build it to do what you need. Service, though, means a lot of things. And when I talk to customers, 9 times out of 10, it might just be a very simple, support issue. And then you get nowadays more and more of, I need it for customer success because that's part of my customer service. And it's becoming the one under the one umbrella, as opposed to before it was quite like different teams, where it's we cover everything. And having the direct integration with HubSpot is vital, because to echo exactly what Stuart just said there, they don't want to go to 3 different places. They want to do it in one place. Why would I have 5 tabs open to do all my things when I can just have 1 tab open and do it in the one place? And that to me is what makes it so important that we have this marriage with Arrows to actually just do it all. Like, tell me what I need to do, build my workflow, build my pipelines, and just let it all run.
Okay. And talking about marriage, why is the Arrows integration so different from something like Gainsight or another like dedicated CS tool?
Because I think it's that dedicated word. Arrows is 100% dedicated to HubSpot and CS. Other tools are dedicated to CS and dedicated to other things, not just the HubSpot and the customer success. And that's where everything falls through those gaps with those other tools.
Okay. And have you got any examples that you could walk us through about like how this might work?
Yeah, so I think it all comes down to the workflows for me, certainly from what I see, in terms of they need to be able to build their automation, and they want it to happen in HubSpot. So when a trigger happens with a ticket, or a customer lands as a new customer, they're starting that onboarding project, the dominoes should fall. With other tools, the dominoes happen. I'm going to keep using my in different tabs example, because that's essentially how it works. So I'm in my one tab, and then I have to remember to open my next tab to check what their score is here, to then correlate that with what's going on the sales side in HubSpot. And I'm constantly going back and forth. And that's just something that is just sloppy, and no business wants that. And that's then when having that like seamless interaction and kind of conversation that happens between Arrows and HubSpot, that's where you kind of see a different level happening.
Okay. And you mentioned a word there for me, workflows, right? And it's come out a couple of times. And I have to say, like, Stuart is the king of the shared workflow on LinkedIn. So if you're not following him, you really do need to go and connect with Stuart Balcombe, because he just gives it away. And that's what I really liked about him. That's why I connected with him. And that's why actually I was a real early pusher for wanting to be the first agency partner for Arrows. I saw the value of this. I really bought into this from a RevOps perspective, and that real 360 customer data view in like a single CRM. We keep talking about removing friction, and we keep talking about all these things that we should do. And personally, I think that you should remove any bias you have to a brand system, and just think about like what gives us as a business like the best picture around our customers, right? And the one thing that I bought into straight away was health score onboarding, and I actually bought it from Stuart and got Stuart to build it for us on HubSpot in the beginning to come to an understanding of what it is. And once we saw the power of that, be like that first partner. But Stuart, talk to us about the hundreds, it seems, of workflows you seem to share, because Arrows seems to be able to do so much. Let's dive into that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Thanks so much for the shout out. Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey, and honestly, I think the big thing for me, I'm sort of a systems nerd. The thing that's been, and Mollie mentioned this earlier, the thing that's been so exciting about HubSpot as a platform is it really is flexible and powerful enough to let you sort of go figure out and build the system that you need to build. The big thing is, do you have the data? Do you have the data in the right place and in the right format to be able to go solve for the business case that you have? And that's sort of really where we started with all the sort of steal this workflow stuff on LinkedIn. Was we kept getting questions from folks, you know, can I run customer success in HubSpot? How do I run, like, tactically, how do I go do this thing in HubSpot? And a lot of it early on, especially, was just, and still is, but just me going and figuring out like, oh, you can actually do this with a workflow in HubSpot. So the big thing, and this is certainly true of the Arrows integration, I mentioned the difference between sort of Arrows and, you know, other CS tools that maybe integrate, but not maybe to the same extent, is giving you data in the format and in the way that you would actually go and use it inside of HubSpot. And I think that being able to pull everything together, because the big thing that isn't talked about a lot, and Mollie sort of mentioned this already, alluding to a lot of this stuff, is like a lot of the things where you want a workflow to come in to remove friction, to improve the efficiency of the team, isn't just related to one team, right? It's the sales to success handoff, for example. Like you have data that's coming from another team or being generated by another team that needs to make it over to your success team at the right time with the right sort of guardrails and safe, requirements in place to make sure that everything is actually there when it's needed. So a lot of the workflows that we have put together are based on sort of that thing. It's like when we meet this threshold in the data, whether it's a health score or whether it's a closed won opportunity in our sales pipeline, whatever it is, like once we reach this sort of milestone point, this threshold, we need to then go and do something else, and we can combine all the data in order to do that in an effective way. And I think that's where workflows are really powerful, is being able to define the process in your data, being able to understand when the data isn't there or something in the process is breaking. That's a big thing that I talk about a lot with workflows, is how are you handling the exception, both for that individual case, right? Like something's missing for this customer, we need to go figure it out so that customer can be successful. But also, how do you use that to improve the system? How do you make sure that we take that information and go make the process more efficient the next time? Make sure that that's a step in our discovery process or whatever it is that could be improved so that we don't have that friction again for future customers. That's something that we talk about a lot with customers. A lot of customers come to us is, I've reached this inflection point in the business. I've hit this new level of growth. I need to make sure the process is able to support our growth goal for the year. Like we want to double revenue for the year. Okay, that's great. But what does that mean? What changes do we have to make to the process, the way that we do things to actually get there? Or actually still be able to support customers once we get there.
Yeah, and I think that you touched on something there that I kind of look at when you're looking at coming back to RevOps, is like the automation of close one deal, this is the next stage, but actually instead of it being, oh, I've got to go and send an email, or I've got to, there's some sort of miscommunication that might happen to send to another team who've then got to maybe get access to the CRM and try and figure something out, or you've hashed some sort of report or some sort of RPA process, and everyone's like trying to make things work in this mold. I really like the fact that close one deal, next workflow is onboarding is going to start in 15 days. Here's all your emails that are going out. Here's all the tasks that need to be done. And like, can you dive into that? Because I feel like the health score onboarding, which I alluded to earlier, I feel like that was one of the key things that really attracted me, right? You're talking about how do we understand the likelihood of a customer churning based on how well the business onboard's done. I think that was a really interesting point. Can you dive into that?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's such a great point that the setting expectations clearly, both the the internal team, they know what is going to happen when a deal moves to this stage, but also for the customer, the thing that we see a lot and is a great indication to your point about the health scoring, a great indication of how successful a customer is going to be is how engaged are they, how quickly do they start making progress once they've bought. Like a lot of businesses have that, oh, the deal's closed, now they're ghosting because it's unclear who needs to do what actually is the next step. So being able to lay that out early and help customers and sort of track the progress that customers are making during onboarding is really impactful for build. We talk about building momentum a lot in onboarding. How do you you don't have to accomplish everything on day one, week one, month one, but how do you start making progress in the right direction to validate the purchase decision they've just made, right? Like depending on your ACV, they've potentially spent a lot of money, committed to a year, committed to whatever contract term you have. How do you start showing that you're going in the right direction? And when somebody isn't on that path, how do you make sure that you're taking the action to put them back on that path or help them get back to the path before they're like, okay, this thing doesn't work, let's churn? How do you sort of proactively identify churn risks by looking at where are they against the baseline of what we expect for the successful customers?
And does that feed into NPS? I mean, that may be a question for you, Mollie, right? Because you got this onboarding, you got NPS in the background, Service Hub. How do you see it?
Yeah, so that's where like I'm limited with what I show customers and what I talk about, because I'm talking about what we just have out of the box in HubSpot. So I will of course be saying NPS is huge, NPS is massive. All those kind of stats is what you need, like to be sending out to your customers. Are they interacting? Are they giving you your scores? are you automatically sending them that survey when they do something? Like, why aren't you sending this when the sale gets closed, but also when they've resolved a support issue or they've gone through week 1 of onboarding or whatever that might be? But that's again because we don't have the modules that are needed to actually define the customer success. And that's also coming back to something else Stuart said there. Like, the other thing that Arrows brings is the actual best practice. So I'm not a consultant. I can show you the tools. I'm the product, and that's me. Whereas, like, when a customer's like, so what would you recommend we should do for our onboarding process or our customer success? I have to kind of take a step back and be like, well, I mean, this is what you could do. This is how you could build a workflow, but actually having, Arrows there to actually say, this is how you build a successful onboarding process. This is how you do this. This is what you should be sending. This is what you should be triggering. This is what should happen after this kind of goes through. And that's, I think, where that real value comes in as well.
So that leads me back to another question, and kind of off of our set list of questions, actually. Sorry about this. Stuart, someone listening might be listening and thinking, this sounds great, but what does Arrows look like? And how does Arrows actually help you do this? Can you get into that for us?
Yeah, so I think at the highest level, the thing that, and one of the reasons I talked about this on LinkedIn for sure, but one of the reasons why Arrows and HubSpot work so well together is that Arrows is really focused on being the customer-facing sort of extension of your internal process, right? So you have, your pipelines, you have your properties, you have everything that your team is working on inside of HubSpot. Arrows sort of adds a collaborative customer-facing layer to that. So an Arrows onboarding plan is that sort of checklist of, for lack of a better term, that sort of checklist of steps that a customer and your team that's, again, it's collaborative, right? So you're going to work through to reach the outcome that you want to get to. So everybody's going to define the success of onboarding differently. Maybe it's, you've sent this many emails if you're an email sending tool. It's you've, completed these modules in our product, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But you're going to be able to lay out the steps to get there, and the customer can actually go and take the action that they need to take, which is the big difference between, compared to, a project management tool or something that you might be more commonly using for sort of internal task management. Arrows has sort of two big things that are different. One is that you can actually take the action in the plans. You can upload files, you can fill in forms, you can collect information, do that kind of thing. But it's also very explicitly designed that there is a correct path here, or this is the path that we have designed to get you from point A to point B, which I think is important to remember whenever you're onboarding customers, is that your customers have a day job. They have a lot of other things that they are trying to do. Getting onboarded to your product, your solution is just one of those things. So how do you sort of take the work out for them of figuring out what's next, and just guide them through that path to being successful? And just sort of to one of the things that happen sort of on the back end of this that Mollie sort of touched on when it comes to, we can help recommendations on like how to build your program. Sherelle, I had a success, built and scaled onboarding programs at booking.com, and Sprout Social has like a lot of sort of scaled onboarding experience. But one of the big things which we say a lot is we don't have all the answers, but we can help you get data. And Arrows is intentionally designed in this way, and sort of in combination with HubSpot, can help you get data about what is happening today. Where are the roadblocks? Where are the sort of barriers that are preventing customers from being successful in onboarding? And how can you use that data to sort of update the process, optimize the process, and sort of iterate towards ultimately, like ideally, everybody goes through onboard, your best ever onboarding is every onboarding, right? But having the data helps you sort of move closer to that. And we certainly provide sort of things that we have seen across all customers, across other use cases that are similar, to help us get there.
I think Mollie summarized this perfectly earlier. She said Arrows forces you into best practice, and you've just said it in a more roundabout way, right? everyone's onboarding is different based on the business, right? So there's no one size fits all onboarding. What you're supposed to do, like you do with marketing, like you do with a sales process, is you optimize and iterate, and you use the data you're collecting to see where the bottlenecks are, and then you investigate, you extrapolate, you theorize, and then you test something, and then see if this makes it better. And I think that that's a great thing. But I suppose one of the other questions that kind of popped into my mind here that someone might want to ask is Arrows then also a project management tool, or would you use a project management tool to kind of manage bits and pieces elsewhere? How does that work?
Bringing all the hard questions. This is a question that we get a ton. The way that we think about this, Arrows is, and I mentioned this earlier, was sort of where Arrows is focused in being the collaborative layer. That's really the distinction. Like, I would not suggest trying to replace, Asana for your internal team with Arrows, for example. Whenever you have tasks that you need customers to do, that then your team is going to go do work to, keep making progress to that plan, Arrows is a great fit because both it's designed for the customer, right? It's designed to be the place where they can go figure out quickly what is the thing they have to do and go do it. But it also means that they have visibility into the work that you're doing, into, you're setting expectations as you go around what's going to happen, what has to happen overall to make sure that we get to the goal that we have. And Arrows is certainly, that's something that we're certainly very conscious of, is like, how do we make that sort of internal, like there is always an element of project management in onboarding, right? It is there are tasks that we have to figure out or make sure that we're doing, that make sure they're staying on schedule, make sure, like, Arrows has due dates, assignments, all these kinds of things. But it is certainly designed for processes, for projects that are collaborative with the customer, and especially when there are things that the customer has to do, which if they don't do them are going to mean they're unsuccessful in onboarding, right? There's folks out there probably have things like that in their own process. If we don't collect this file with data that we have to go enter into our product, or if we don't get them to fill in this form that tells us what integration they need, like, we can't keep going. Like, those are the kinds of things where there is that back and forth, that sort of collaborative element, where Arrows is a good fit.
And what's funny about that is I was speaking to Rob, who's at BIAS, and he's on the call, and we were talking about ClickUp. And one of the things we're doing at the moment, and please don't laugh at us, but we're moving into ClickUp, so we're coming into the future. And Rob was like, it's really hard to move these playbooks because some of this stuff is not for customers to see. And what I like about what you've been saying is like, look, you've got to be fully focused on sharing the journey with a customer, as opposed to trying to like wiggle your way through and split things out. Because the whole point of onboarding is it should be handheld as much as possible, even though we all want to try and sort of like automate it all. I think the best onboarding is the experience that you leave your customer with, right? That is the best example of the onboarding. I'm not sure that you can define what that looks like A to Z, but ultimately, if the experience is, I'm happy, that was really good, and I know everything I need to do, you've done your job. And I think if the person has to be involved in that, then most certainly we should do that. So leads me into my final question, and then I'd like it, if you can, to maybe share a few examples if that's possible. But if CS can now be run directly on HubSpot with Service Hub, which has got ticketing, which has got chat, which can be workflowed, which has NPS, which does customer surveys. I mean, we're talking about a pretty robust product now. So does Arrows now remove other CS tools from the mix if you are a company fully invested in HubSpot?
It's a question for me. I think that is definitely the decision. Like, the more that Service Hub develops, the deeper the education around use cases and how to implement things gets. I think that is certainly a decision. Is, are you going to buy a CS platform which is, predominantly going to be just for your CS team, and figure out, how to integrate around the edges with HubSpot, or are you buying HubSpot and Arrows and you're investing in building that connected customer journey with all of your data inside of HubSpot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I come in here?
Yeah, definitely.
So the word has come up like too mmany times for me not to mention it, and it's the word data. I think that's something that is really massive about the arrows into HubSpot, is that the data that I always say, once it's in HubSpot, we can report on it. Once it's in there, we can do something with it. And that's the key to it, is that you are getting that data into HubSpot because you're utilizing the like-for-like properties, you're utilizing the correct format of the data, you're doing all that stuff so that it ultimately is now in HubSpot. And if it's a customer who has their sales, their marketing, and also their service in HubSpot, they have now opened like a massive like magnifying glass into their business, and they can now pull this data into reports. They can use it in workflows, they can use it in whatever they need. And I think that's something that a lot of other tools are missing the trick in, because when you go to do an integration with another tool that do CS, the like for like is not there. So the property to property sync is not the same. The object to object sync is not the same. And that's something that just makes it's going to involve too much of a custom integration now for me to build this in. Whereas that's exactly what Arrows do. They take it as it is and they put it into HubSpot for what it should be, and it's mirrored. Yeah.
Perfect.
I think that's a really interesting point, and I think this is the thing. One of the reasons why we chose HubSpot over, other CRM options is the sort of first thing to really go deep on, is that HubSpot does cover the entire customer journey. I know this has been a big sort of drumbeat for HubSpot with the connected customer journey, but as buyers' expectations change, as sort of the way that customers interact with software across the life cycle changes, it's not just about marketing to sales to success. It's much more fluid, and people in different teams need different data at different times, and being able to have all of that in one tool is a huge advantage.
Yeah, definitely. So I've got some questions from the audience that I'd like to lean into, and do the best that you can here. Someone's asked us, what do you guys think are some best practices for onboarding? And either of you can start with this one.
Best practices for onboarding in HubSpot specifically, or sort of principles?
Well, I think in context to what this is about, I'm sure that's what they meant, but the question was quite short.
Okay. Yeah, so the principles that I talk about a lot for onboarding, and the first one I think is, you sort of mentioned this earlier, Paul, like how do you provide the experience that ultimately gets the customer to the point where they want to go? How are they happiest in onboarding? The first thing that I think often gets missed is, do you actually know where the customer is trying to go? Like, have you clearly defined with the customer what success looks like? What did they sign up to try to achieve? Versus just providing the same templated, I mean, obviously we lean into templates and pathways a lot, but how do you make sure that actually lines up with the goals that the customer has? That's sort of the first thing. The second sort of connected to that is actually be opinionated about your onboarding. Like, don't make sure that there is a path that you're laying out. Don't, as much as possible, you have worked with a lot of customers, you've solved similar problems, you sort of know there actually is a best path. How do you lay that out and help customers stay on that path, help drive them to the action they need to take to keep moving through that? And then as you're going, make sure that you're collecting data about, which obviously Arrows helps with this, but make sure that you're collecting data about where are people getting stuck? Where are the places where they're sort of branching off that path? Like, is that an entirely new variant of your onboarding? Like, do you need a different, in Arrows it's templates, but like, do you need a new path, or is that just an improvement to the existing one that you can go and make? Because I think that that's one of the things that happens a lot, is everybody wants to say that their customers are, and this is a Donna Webber term, but special snowflakes. Everybody is uniquely different, and everybody needs an entirely custom experience, which in our experience across hundreds of thousands of onboardings is actually not true. Like, there are typically pretty definable pathways. Sure, there may be one or two things that are going to be tweaked for individual customers based on those goals that but by and large, building a repeatable pathway is going to be a much more efficient, much more effective way to get them to the outcome, because customers, when they sign up, want to know that you've done this before. They want to know that you know the path to being successful with your product, rather than reinventing the wheel every time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Mollie?
I would say do your onboarding process yourself. So be the customer on the journey. So if you're telling a customer to complete A to Z of tasks, you complete A to Z of tasks to see if it's effective. Like, you know the product, you know the tool that you're trying to onboard the customer to, and telling someone how to learn it is a lot different than you going back to learn it yourself, and that's something that I think holds a lot of value.
So what was really interesting there, Mollie, is that, like, you touched on a few things that I thought, but the one thing, and I always like to get to a summarized comment about it, is that, and I'm not saying other platforms aren't good, but it feels like Arrows is focusing on purpose rather than process. So it's not that Arrows isn't helping you deliver a process, but it's more collaborative in its approach. So it's more about, what is the purpose of this onboarding? So you have to think about that, rather than, did they do A, B, C, D, and E? Because, like, that just means that one step got missed, but actually that doesn't tell you whether that person actually needed to miss that step and whether that step is valuable. Then you're going to go and buy some other Pendo or something else to try and figure that out. And actually what we want to do is say, look, what is the purpose of this? People are talking about, persona-driven onboarding and all of these things, so that you've got multiple structures depending on the user, the buyer, whatever. That's kind of where we should be now anyway. And I feel like Arrows really leans into that, and that made it really impactful there. I've got another question, and I'm sure that we can actually answer this, but maybe you can, right? So someone's asked, how do you measure time to value in onboarding? Now, can you answer that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question.
Okay, cool.
The first thing is, the starting point of this is, you have to define what successfully what does onboarded look like?
Yeah.
Like, you need to know what is the successful end state, and by definition, like, you need to know what your fail state is too, which, that's a contentious thing. Like, definitely got pushed back on that. Like, you should never fail someone on. Yes, you absolutely should fail people on onboarding. The reason being that you can infinitely expend resources on trying to onboard people, right? You need to know, what does failed look like? Why did they fail? But anyway, to the question about time to value, once you know what that end state is, well, then you can just measure, and this is a perfect use for HubSpot pipelines, is then you can just measure how long did it take them from, and define the start, right? Whether that's the deal move to close one in the sales pipeline, whether that's the thing that people want to measure a lot is time from close one to kickoff held, or kickoff booked, certainly. And once you have your process, you have your start, you have your end, you have the stages in your process. In HubSpot, you can report on, and Arrows will push data in to help you do this, but more granularly. But once you have all that defined, you can report on how long does it take to get to this milestone, how long does it take to get to that milestone, and obviously the defining that value moment, whether that is the end of your onboarding process or whether it's something prior to that, whatever, you can sort of just define whatever point you want that to be and create a report in HubSpot to show you that.
There we go. Love a report in HubSpot. Mollie, do you want to add to that? Or
I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's hard. I think time and value are two things that everyone is going to be different. Yeah.
Okay. And last question we have was, can you use Arrows to manage a service-led onboarding? So a company that is service rather than product-led?
Yeah, certainly. We definitely have customers who, both software companies, Sullivan of Digital BIAS. Really, the way that we think about sort of when you can apply a plan is, do you have a shared outcome that you're trying to reach with a customer, whatever that looks like. If you have a process to get to that outcome, you can create an Arrows plan to make sure that everybody knows, what do we need to do in order to get there.
Okay. And so, I mean, our audience always tells me, Paul, we really like it when we get like the practical sense of what things are doing. Now, if I'm onboarding someone, I'm doing a website project, right? That's a service-led business. firstly, and then you know, I want to go from close one deal to kickoff workshop. Am I able to map the steps that I take between close one and signed off workshop and literally health score that using Arrows and Service Hub?
Yes.
Ah.
I mean, the health score is such a subjective thing.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, you can, and I would, in that case, I would probably use I would look at sort of two metrics. One is how many people get to that point. Like, is it past, like, are there any people that just aren't getting to that workshop happening? What's the pass fail rate there? And then how long are people taking to get there? Like, and if there are, and sort of in line with the pass fail thing, like if there are multiple steps in there, how far are people getting? Like, are they, you know, if we're setting a goal, if we want that to happen in, let's say it's 5 days, and that's a healthy score.
Yep.
Like, what's the range there? Is it, you know, 80% is getting there in the 5 days and they're healthy, but 10% are never getting there and 10% are somewhere in between?
Yep.
Being able to pull that out, and that's where having that data, having the sort of granular data of did they complete this step but not that step, is something you can pull together and
so that's process optimization, right? And then
exactly, yeah.
Last question, and I promise it's the last one. When I'm just sitting here thinking about product-led companies and complex onboarding companies, you know, like enterprise onboarding, can you use Arrows for a PLG company or not? I mean, it's the hard thing is self-serve, right? So it kind of answers itself. But if you were kind of looking at tracking someone through your, you know, PLG process, is Arrows to do that or not?
So Arrows is not a product adoption tool, right? So like, as opposed to like a Chameleon or a Pendo or an AppQs or something like that, like Arrows is not a comparable, like it is not in the same, not solving for the same problem as those tools.
Right.
However, the one thing that I would say, I mean, you can absolutely use HubSpot to track PLG motion. If you're pushing product data into HubSpot, you can have a pipeline for product data. We have, you know, videos and resources and stuff on that. The one thing that I would say is that often there are very few companies, like they will start to see this more and more. There are not that many companies at scale, at least, that are purely PLG, right? At some point, it's a spectrum, and at some point you have, you know, product qualified, or, you know, you want to escalate to sales assist, or you want to escalate to, you're going to onboard at the account level in a more human-led way than you are at the user level. So we certainly see companies that do both, right? They have a very self-serve product-led motion in their product, and then they layer on a sort of an Arrows plan at the account level.
So this leads into another chat that we're going to do about ABM and critical mass for PLG, right? You want critical mass of users for enterprise accounts, so you can sit and wait to amass them, or you still run ABM and you target the accounts and you show that the product's still a good fit for the enterprise. I think that's a different conversation. But listen, guys, I really appreciate you coming on. We've done great at 45 minutes. I think there's a wealth of information being shared there. So Mollie, thank you very much. Stuart, thank you very much. I'm still looking forward to being one of your initial partners. So we'll follow that path offline. Audience, thanks for joining us. And remember, it is onboarding with purpose. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.